Good day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. Today, I'd like to address you in regards to the recent interview that Kamala Harris shared in Pittsburgh after her discussion of her economic uh, proposals for her opportunity economy. The interview was short and lasted about 24 minutes. My discussion will be much longer, as I will go into detail in regards to what my responses would have been given the same questions. So each question is separated individually and just abbreviated. I didn't go into the setup that the interviewer created for the question. And then the details in terms of like the specifics of how it was created. But I did write down a little bit what I wanted to say. I basically have already answered all of this off the top of my head, and I'm not going to read verbatim what I said, although it would be very enlightening. For shortening, for brevity, I'm just going to touch on the topics as I go along. So the first question was about the economy directly. And it goes, there are lots of Americans that don't see themselves in your plans. For those who say these policies are not for me, what do you say to them? It is a question of, does the living quality of life become more affordable and accessible and commonplace with your economic plan? Because that will touch on the lives of every individual. In terms of what my response would be is not exactly what Kamala would say. She really did go back into re-emphasizing, although I will say her discussion on the economy was of a different tune, same substance, different tune than what it has been. So it didn't sound as repetitive as it has been at like her rallies. But even still, it's still falling on. She really seems to believe in what she thinks is considered opportunity. And I don't necessarily think that that is the right approach for right now, given all of the circumstances and the variables at play in terms of where our economy stands now and where we need to get ourselves in short order so that we're in a better foundation, a better footing on solid ground, which is where my approach to the economy would come from, which is talking about prioritization of economic engagements over just the same repetitive statements of we're going to make an opportunity economy. In order for an economic plan to work, it needs to have clear plans with set parameters to make sure that our policies are specific and precise in terms of what we are wanting to change and how we want that to happen. The how is very important in terms of economics because it is in itself a longitudinal approach to something. Like we have to set our coordinates, we have to understand our bounds, our limitations, we have to understand our potentials and opportunities. The opportunities in economy have to be logical, they have to be intelligent, they have to be approachable in a very specific manner. And it has to be something that is inviting and welcoming. It has to let people get the point that we're trying to emphasize when we're speaking of the economy. And the people have to be able to grasp the reason why we're doing it this particular way and to be able to see themselves as part of something that's bigger than just needing to make a living. But there also needs to be a sense that you're a part of a individual and collective responsibility. And when we're intentionally focusing on the final outcomes and the goals, then we can get at the results and ensure our way of getting at those results are done so in such a way where the nation is strong and prosperous and stable, and that our union is a cohesive bond. Like these approaches, all things that we have to do has to be able to be worked on. It has to be a workable solution. And when we're doing that in a workable way, one of the ways that we go about entering into a secure situation with one another, that we can thrive on through our economy, is not just about putting people to work. It's making sure that we understand work is great and that it has its particular purpose, but it's about exalting the humble and helpful parts of us that wish to be in service to one another. The most consequential aspect of our economy isn't about profiteering. It's not just about executable notions or to invent things or to executively administer in order to enterprise or about growing the workforce. It's just not about those things, which can be practically applied in one version of policy or another, but it really is about coming together to formalize the productivity of the economy. We have to make sure that the economy itself is an industrious innovation. It has to be a way by which the viability of our nation is mechanized and that our productivity is done towards certain specific ends. We have to put forth our best capacities within that mechanization and enable ourselves to be able to increase the stock of our supplies of resources and our capacity to build things out. We need to establish resource commons that everybody gets to benefit from, everybody gets to utilize, and everybody gets to build off of so that they can increase their accessibility to assets and for them to be able to hold and retain possessions of assets that can produce a capital gain of benefit for themselves. But make sure that everybody has a similar stake in the economy that's not just what you work for labor wages, but that your work in the economy works for you in return at the individual level, the independence level, to make sure that we remain independent and interdependent. We have to use our economy as a means to help to sustain our independence. But we also have to make sure that we're sustaining an interdependence with one another that helps us to ensure that we're all working together to get along, to produce similar outcomes, and that we are producing things in such a way that would lead to a mutual benefit for mutual interests and mutual securities. It's about changing the way we do things, our way of existing as a union in a nation together. It's our way of living that has to change. Our behaviors, our actions, our thoughts, our conversations, all of these things need to change. And the way that we do that is to evolve our stories over time, and not just how we tell what we're doing, but how we actually go about doing things. And that is a part of the productivity of our economy. It's part of the directive of what I like to call the nation of stewards. In order to become stewards, we have to gear our mechanization of our governance in such a way that is consequential, but also is contextual, in a sense of we have to be able to create matching emphasis in terms of what we're going to get for the value that we put in. Because the whole concept of our economy as it is missing the concept of equivalencies, that equivalent exchange that you get. That's why money was made, essentially, was to create a sense of sameness amongst us when we trade, so that a person who has milk from a cow could trade with somebody who has spun some thread so that you can sew clothes for your kid and the other person can have milk for their cereal. We have to be able to make that exchange that the gallon of milk maybe not doesn't end up being exactly the same value of a single spool of thread. So how do you determine the difference between that? Well, money is the facilitation between that. It means to help us to transact more efficiently. But we've kind of lost sight of the point of, the point of the exercise of transacting with one another isn't to exchange money and that money is the thing. It's about what the money is supposed to be representing in terms of the equivalency exchange amongst one another so that we are transacting with one another our varying versions of value. It's trading one value for another value, but because the value isn't the same for milk as it is for thread, you need to have some sort of equivalency, a baseline standard, and that's what money creates. But that point of exchange has somehow created this weird conscious aspect to it where people are thinking in terms of I got to earn money, I got to get money, and when you have money you're successful, rather than thinking in terms of what is the end result of that money. Where does that money go to? What does that money achieve? What is the outlining aspects of what that money is driving yourself towards? What is the outcome? And so if you're not able to think about that and you just stop at the, sense of money and whatever the face value is, you're really not getting to the substance of the point of the exercise of even transacting with one another. We need to make sure that when we do transact with one another, we are doing it in such a way that questions what's fair, what's just, what's reasonable, what's right, and that we can put forth our sense of matching our economy of values into a outcome where we have this transaction that takes value from one place and puts it in another place, and that you can build off of that in a capacity to retain higher standards of values, or to combine and add and component different types of values so you can generate higher levels of values. You can innovate value, whereas money, you can't innovate money. You can't change money. Money is what it is. It's what its face value is. But I can take that thread and I can weave it into fabric and I can create clothing out of it. So there's the utility, the functionality that's behind it that really holds the sense of what you're doing is providing a paying it forward value, where it's not what it is what it can become, sort of thing. Whereas money is just money, and people go crazy about it. It's makes no sense to me. Is like, yeah, when you get money, it's great because of what you can do with it. And it's the proper intended use of money that really helps to make our economy functional. But our economy isn't just made off of what's built today, or what we spend today, but also what we save for the future and what we're able to do with our matching of our savings into this complementary interpretation of recognizing opportunities for intelligent investments so that we can strategize our components and our formalizations and our compounding of values so that through this strategic approach, we can make a pivotal investment into a wealth that builds over time. And recognizing that as important because of the fact that we need to be able to command within our transactions and authorization of what sort of value that we're sharing with others and what sort of value we're retaining for ourselves. And understanding that wealth is a holistic thing. It's not just having money or tangible things, but also a power that comes with wealth, that you're saving and you're securing a future. And because you know that you're secured, you're able to act more more consciously, and you have more stability that you can build on. And that's something that our nation can build upon. Is the more stable people are in their everyday lives, the more stable our nation becomes. And so uh, providing for some sense of like supplementation for people, and especially those who are just getting started in life, or those who are somehow struggling through overcoming unforeseeable circumstances that were beyond their control, like a medical emergency, or a disability, or a natural disaster, or death in the family, or some sort of fallout from a negative consequence, or losing your capacity to work, or these sorts of things. um, you need to be able to still make it through when your life is being impacted. And so we need to have some sense of like a supplemental approach to making sure that every aspect of our economy is interoperable, and we have resources enough in abundance in our commons of resources and commons of infrastructure that we can help people when they're down, so they're not out of commission, or out of the participation and contribution to society, that they can still be involved, and that when they can build themselves back up, they can fully integrate back into society. That's the whole point of promoting the general welfare, is not to give people hand-ups, handouts, or some impossible chance at a big break. Rather, a benefit of opportunity, of a fair shake. Something happened, but we got your back. And we need to establish that, because that is upholding the health of our nation, the stability of our nation. It helps us to sustain social accord and civic coherence within our society. So, in order for us to have an economy that is abundant enough that we can have this sense of value, of abundance enough that what we make today can compound in value for the future, that we can save for the rainy day or the unexpected emergency, so that we can pay forward opportunities to help those who have fallen out and need help to be reintegrated back in. We have to have an economy that gives us a sense that we're gaining every single day and making advantages, and different advantages in different ways, in different forms of trade and transaction, that we might be able to get between our various versions of value that we create, that we produce and create. And we need to pay forward to the future, give ourselves something that we can reap benefit from in the future, for later use, like storing something and keeping it in those stores to save it for the future, when perhaps you're not quite as productive as you could be or you once were. We need to have an economy that's able to take on that type of approach, a holistic sense of what's crucial, what's important, and understand that it's not just about making money. Money is a bottom line standard. So the things that are actually the essence of the value of work and jobs, uh, is to make sure that there's no cracks people fall through, to make sure that we are creating productivity that creates results that benefit people's lives. Right now, as it is, the how we go about producing the economy, there's a lot of opportunities for exploitation of workers, exploitation of the environment, the degradation of our biosphere, damaging our capacity to be able to provide a habitable planet, or to continue to sustain a habitable planet. And there's instabilities and insecurities in the economy where there's very few protections for people. And for one reason or another, there might be an economic downturn, and suddenly whole populations of people lose their capacity to be involved in their way of life. And they fall on hard times. And even though, as I say, have 3 months worth of savings, sometimes, downturns last longer than that. We learned that with the pandemic. And that was a years long economic downturn, and the lack of productivity during that time period, people going without having the things that they need. They go without things that they enjoy. Their life vitality was dimmed. they weren't able to replenish their stores of sense of zest for life, and many people suffered. It wasn't just the economic fallout; it was also our social and our sense of health and well-being that fell out during the pandemic. And so we need to be able to have an economy that can be robust and resilient in those sorts of unforeseeable futures, in case something happens. Something's going to happen. You're not sure exactly what it's going to be, but we have to be prepared for what is to come. And the only way to do that is if we create an economic, a broad enough spectrum of economic prosperity that can give us residual benefits over time, even if things stop working for a while. And we need to be able to have an auxiliary economy that we can switch into that helps us to operate during those downtimes and still be able to produce and be productive without it creating this massive influx of money without the backing of productivity to make sure that we don't generate the perfect storm for an inflation crisis, as we try to overcome and recover and start to get back into the way things were, which is exactly where we're at right now. In terms of having an auxiliary economy, it's about making sure that we have the necessary capacity to shift our productivity and our resources, and then shift back into our legacy economy, and then be able to pay back the stores of our reserves that we've put in this auxiliary economy. So that we don't have the issue where we have an abundance of money and no productivity to back it, and then that gap space that's there is the reason why we're having such a hard time with inflation. The cost of everything is not able to catch up because not enough people have been able to be productive to earn enough money to be able to afford, things like they used to. So we've had a loss of jobs. We have a loss of different types of industries. And so the best approach is to make sure that our economy is based on outcomes rather than just earning money. And so if our outcome is to make sure that people have the resources that they need when there's a downturn, or for some reason they're not able to pay for that for themselves, we need to have this auxiliary economy we can switch to that provides for them those things that are necessary. But then when we go back, we have a way to fill in that gap space with reinforced productivity that generates value that can then recycle back into the system to keep it flourishing. We just don't have that now, and that's why we're still suffering. In terms of the overarching goals of an economy, has to be about development, a sustainable development. That's why I believe wholeheartedly in the designation of a fundamental framework by which we can achieve an ever more healthy, sustainable, just, and peaceful world, is to give a directive to our economy, which is to become a stewardship, a welfaring stewardship in a stewarding nation. We steward people and family and communities and the planet and our nation, and that directive as to why we produce economy, and then have a fundamental framework by which we achieve that sense of stewardship, is to follow the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which outlines everything that a happy, healthy, sustainable, just, and peaceful society would need to be able to align with and build upon and enact in through policy this fundamental framework, and then to stay within planetary boundaries, which understands the guiding limitations between what we can and what we can't do, in order to make sure that everything is still interoperable with one another, and that we don't fall short of our capacity to be able to provide for ourselves now and then into the future. We have to make sure that in our policies, we're reinforcing peace and justice and strong institutions. And that's one of the most important aspects of the Sustainable Development Goals, is the concept of, no matter what you do, whether you're trying to end poverty or to have zero hunger, or to reduce inequalities, or to promote gender equality, or to have clean water and sanitation, or to have renewable and sustainable energy, or innovation, industry, and infrastructure, you have to be able to have strong and peaceful institutions, and you need to have partnership for the goals to be able to achieve that as well. So each one of those is a reinforcing, you know, compartmentalized concept, blocking out and categorizing what needs to be accomplished, but they're all mutually reinforcing. And if we take on that type of directive with our economy, we're going to have a much more reasonable approach to how we're going to mutually advantage one another. You know, we need to be strategic and intelligent in terms of our approach, and we need to not necessarily take one specific aspect of the economy and do a piecemeal solution to it, which is what I believe is Kamala's version of opportunity, is to give a, you know, incentive for people to gain access to housing, to home ownership, and then incentive for people to have an increased deduction for their business, to reduce the cost of prescription medication and reduce the cost of food, and to be able to give a child tax credit for new families, and to increase the existing or the original framework of the child tax credit as well for the first few years of your child's life. And these are piecemeal solutions, and I get the concept where policy has to be practically applied in a definite specific way in order to achieve a definite specific outcome, because I like outcomes. I the whole concept of anything I do has to be outcome engineering, and it has to be in a very specific way. It has to be formalized and calculated, but there are variables of considerations in terms of like how you go about doing that, and what you won't be able to do because of your approach of taking that specific route. And if we're only solving for piecemeal solutions instead of this overarching, you know, design and architecture of a true proper capitalism in a welfaring stewardship economy, if you have that type of overarching view and everything has to align within that, and it builds off that fundamental framework of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and within the bounds of our planetary boundaries, and then we create positive and negative sanctioning that keeps people in alignment with that, and we have enforceable regulation, and then we have a welcoming and inviting environment for businesses to spawn and to grow and to develop and establish, you know, and for the economy to gear towards innovation, education, infrastructure, and sustainable development, then those things are inviting everybody in, but in your own unique way, to come into this opportunity of economizing our intended purpose for creating economy with one another, is to create those outcomes that are going to make sure America is a resilient, strong, integrity bound, ever evolving, ever in more perfect union, and to make sure that we're able to provide for people the things that we had promised, that this is what our nation is all about. You know, we are here to, you know, form a more perfect union and to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And for me, liberty is really about economy. And if we are not taking a big overarching view, give us a specific directive, you know, one of the things that Kamala continuously says is, we're charting a new way forward. Well, to chart somewhere, you have to have a map, and you have to have a direction, and then you have to have a sense of, you know, when you want to be there. You have to know where you are, when you are, to know who you are, and to know how you're going to consistently be that. And if we don't have those defining elements of our economy, then it's just we're being pulled at all these different directions and all these different ways. And so then we get caught in these situations where people who have more capital power can pull our economy into a direction that maybe not everybody else wants to be pulled into. And then it's not the will of the people. We're all of a sudden, being forced into a direction by whoever has the most power accumulated. Like in the case of artificial intelligence, we have quite a few people that are just all in invested in producing a, artificially intelligent future. But there is nobody, and I mean nobody, who's doing the due diligence to be able to readily prepare people for that future. They're just like, we're building this thing and we're pulling everybody along to do it, and just expecting everybody to adapt to it like we adapted to having smartphones and we changed our behavior and everything, and our whole lives are built around this technology. They think that's what's going to happen with artificial intelligence. But without having any boundaries to that, there is so much opportunity for this to turn into a bad thing. There's lots of good potentials out there, but there are a lot of bad actors with nefarious intent who will use this to exploit people, and they already have, and they've succeeded, and it has caused a significant amount of harm, unnecessary harm, because it's being pulled by these people who have no guardrails to prevent them from taking it just wherever they have their whim to go. Now, if we had an economy that had a proper intended use, we have a purpose, we have a premise, we have a strategy, we have a vision, we have a directive, we have a place that we're trying to get to. Build your technology, build your artificial intelligence, but make sure that it is achieving the engineering of the outcomes that we want to achieve. And when you do that, it builds in, it's an integral, inherent guidepost by which everybody can be led into a direction that makes sure that we're not being led astray or pulled off course. Because oftentimes it's when it's too late to respond, we then try to act, and policy always lags behind, reality, especially when it comes to innovations. So if we have that innovations to not necessarily have, stoppers, and we don't want to stifle innovation, but to give it a guide and to say, we want to achieve these outcomes and your productivity has to fall in line somehow. How are you going to contribute in that way? And that will help us to have a little bit more of a sense of actual governance when it comes to how we're going to technologically advance, but making sure we're doing it so that we're peacefully evolving. We need to be a technologically advanced, peacefully evolved society that is working towards a common goal interest. And if we have an economy that has that, that's going to move in the right direction. And so when you ask, if I don't see myself in the policies that you have, it's like, but you could see yourself if it was something that really was an overarching, grand vision. It is a baseline architecture that anybody can build off of, anybody can participate in. And then you go back from there. Grand picture, overview, we're creating a stewardship economy. We're going to be welfaring stewards, and then draw it back. And then we're going to build this segment of commons infrastructure and this segment of commons resources, and we're going to build within every locality these unique projects that bring people together to achieve the stewardship that is necessary for that area, befit the needs of those people in that specific area. But it follows a general framework that says what sustainability looks like in the broadest, most general sense. Now apply that accordingly to your areas, and then innovate along those lines. Like, how can you help us define best practices and best technology, that lifestyle, convenience products and services that can help us to, achieve stewardship and apply broadly? You know, that's the type of approach to economy you need to have. And then when you look at specific policy measures that you have for that, it's again, we're creating the framework of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so we need to make sure that all of our regulation helps us to stay in alignment with that. And the intention is to make sure that people have stewardship of their homes and a safe home space, and that we have appropriate education that is education for the now and for the future. And then we need to have infrastructure that people can utilize and benefit from, in a resource commons that all people can transact values through, that isn't just based off of cash dollars. It's based off of, outcomes and values in terms of how you can achieve and compound values into greater outcomes. So in terms of what Kamala says is opportunity, it is far better offering than what Trump is offering, because Trump's piecemeal solutions are very much skewed in favor to self-enrichment and the enrichment of his elite cohort. And it's like this insulated pocket of thriving that is going to really help to create even more gross inequalities in our society that would be irreversible, because of the policies that he would put in place would completely, in an economic sense, disenfranchise people, make people unable to actively participate and contribute to the economy, because it's going to be a gross perversion of capitalism. And you can see this plainly just simply by his approach to Bitcoin and his idea of cryptocurrencies being, the wave of the future, to the point where I'm going to be a crypto president. And mind you, my family is now making a crypto, empire or whatever. And his intention is to skew policies that are going to favor that it becomes a self-enrichment. And so it's about how you make money. And again, when I think of, in terms of, if we allow him to have the reins of our economy, he's going to lead it in a direction that is only within the realm of what he believes is possible. And what he sees and what he thinks of and what he puts first and foremost is what he gets out of the situation. And so he's only going to apply policies in government that are going to reinforce something that he needs, whether it's directly to him or indirectly to one of his people that will be beholden by favor to help him in some other roundabout way. This man is about helping himself and helping others who can help him, not about helping the American people. Whereas at least Kamala has the best interests of America at heart and really does believe that her opportunity economy is going to give people that advantage. And it will, in the ways that it does, but it's not enough for everybody to say, I can see myself in the future of this economy prospering. I can see my prosperity in your policies, and I want to involve myself and be there and participate and contribute and become involved and to work together to achieve that outcome. Because there's only certain people that's going to gear towards. And when it comes in terms of like the cost of things, her policies fall short of the substance in terms of the how she will approach these sorts of things. And she doesn't seem to have enough of the creative, well, we might be able to try this for best practices. But what she does have for her benefit is that she listens and she's receptive and she's willing to try to discover best practices, learn from those who do know best, and then be able to form that into policy and then apply it. And I believe that because of that, it makes her the right president for right now. So moving on to the next question. Why do people think Trump is better to handle the economy? This is an easy one. He is a brander, and he sells his brand, and he puts forth his brand as a idea that he's selling everybody on. And so what he's providing doesn't have substance. There's nothing in it in terms of like, um, a direct result of him and his actions and his beliefs and his, reputation and his outcomes and the things that he's achieved in his life and the details of the hows of his policies. All of these things assure that he is going to be the best person to lead on the economy. It's not. It's him being a brander, and he has spent his entire life increasing and inflating the value of the Trump name so that he can put his stamp of Trump on anything, and all of a sudden it increases in value. You just put it on everything from buildings to steaks, and it's not necessarily that that building or that steak is any better than any other building or steak. It's just it has the Trump imprint on it. And so because of that, he is giving people a false sense that he has this capacity to succeed. He flies around in a plane that has his name on it. He, is constantly golfing at a luxury golf resort that he owns. And, he's constantly portraying that of being a successful person, despite the fact that he's had that same persona even when he was going through multiple bankruptcies. And he considers himself successful to the point where people have willingly given this man their entire life savings to go to his fake made up university because he promised them that they were going to learn how to be rich like him. So he has people, hook, line, sinker sold on the idea that he is this successful person when it comes to the economy. And it's not to say that he hasn't done things, and not to say that it isn't a form of success to be able to, make your name be so valuable that when you put it on something, it increases, the amount of money that you can get for that. But then you have to think of also the terms of what has he done in the economy? His entire approach has been to create luxury items, a luxurization of things. It's catering to a very small elite class, people that are high spenders, and he can cater to that by creating this, luxury environments, luxury hotels, luxury golf courses, and that, inflated sense of value where like the idea of having a Trump golf course doesn't necessarily mean it's the best golf course that's out there. The Trump hotel doesn't mean it's necessarily the best hotel. But he creates things that are on that high-end value. Because there's more money to be made off of people that have high dollars to spend than it is to make money off of people who are, low income, middle class. So you're not going to build things to cater to those people because it's harder to extract large sums of money from them. But you can from other people, and if you give them a sense that this is really valuable brand, then you can get even more money out of them. And those are the sorts of things that he's created. If he genuinely cared about creating an economy that worked for everybody, he would be focusing on the chance to build things that cater to everyone. And he's never done that. That's not in his repertoire. He has not accomplished that on any level. And when he has created things that, cater to the, lower class of people in terms of like their capacity to have, expendable money to spend, it's always been these trinkety type things, like him passing off, when he ran for president before, he was passing off trying to sell people teddy bears. He sells his MAGA hats and these flags and Trump Bibles and, a coin that really just aligns with the sense of, he really puts into terms what inflation is all about. It's about minting this valueless thing and then extracting real value for people and exchanging it for this valueless thing. And, it's like Trump really knows how to turn $100 into a paperweight, something that And I'm not trying to say that it doesn't hold value to his fan base, the people who really believe in the Trump brand. It's very much like people believing in the brand of, Nike, or to believe in the brand of Dolce Gabbana or whatever. The idea that it's like that name, it's a reputation that precedes itself, and so you can sell to people who want to be a part of that in crowd of that branding. And so there's value to that, certainly, but the problem with it is that when it comes to the substance of things, it only holds value because you believe it has value. It doesn't actually have some sort of tangibility behind it. And that's the type of economy he's getting ready to set up. If you look at the piecemeal solutions that he has for, his tax system that he's trying to do, his approach to, I'm going to fix it real good. I'm going to fix it real good for cost of food. I'm going to fix it real good. Just trust me on this. He just pushes the how off into the future, and then he just fills it in with it. Just trust the Trump brand. And people are supposed to just take that at that face value when there's no substance behind it. And then when he actually gets into office and he has to apply these things in some way, he has so many people he's beholden to, the Bitcoiners, got to behold to them, because he made all these promises to them, and it's aligned with enriching his, Bitcoin, or his cryptocurrency or whatever. And so, and all these other people that have helped to get him into office, like, he's going to have to pay, back all of these special favors that these people, gave to him to get him into office, so that now they are beholden to him. He's going to care about those things. He's not going to have time. There's only so much he can do. He's not going to have time to focus on, helping the American people. Put it in terms like this, is like he really seriously cared about our immigration in America. And if he really cared about the border, he would be going and he would be building a border. He would be able to find, if he's some kind of great successful businessman, he would find a way to be able to economize border security to make sure that we have a safe border. If it really mattered to him, it doesn't matter to him. It doesn't matter to him. It's just the thing that he can run on that, makes him seem like, he's going to be this protector, this savior. Like, he's so much like proof that he has the authoritarian spark within him. Everything that he does is just like, check it off the list of all the traits of an authoritarian. He's got it. And that's not what America needs. And he's not going to lead us forward in the right direction. He has no sense of what true economy is. He has no sense of helping to make America work for 100% of the people here. And he has no sense of how to create genuine value, because his sense of creating value is a Trump name stamped on stuff. He doesn't care about the substance of anything. And unless it is, how can we, uber luxurify something and turn it into a luxury thing so that we can inflate the price of it. That's not substance. No, that's not, as Kamala says, it's not serious. There's no seriousness to this man, but we should take the consequences of his actions seriously, because they're profoundly serious and could be significantly detrimental to our nation. But people only believe he can deal with the economy because he's given this false sense that he's a successful person, when money isn't success. Grifting people is not success. Creating novelty trinkets, useless and antiquated junk we don't actually need, that's not true prosperity, And so people trust him because he's playing into that false sense of money is success, that people think, it signals success in society. And it's a false notion that we have fallen victim to multiple times. And this is the reason why people, like Trump did with his failed Trump University, convince people to take the money that they have, that they could apply to investment in their life and give it to somebody like him so they can teach them skills of how to make more money. And in the process, don't actually give them any value, and they lose out the value that they had that could have applied to something real and tangible. And that's the type of economy we'll be facing if we give the reins to Trump. It's going to be something along the lines of, you know, give me the coffers of, the federal budget, let me have reins of the economy, and then I'm going to direct it. Don't worry. I got this. Trust me. I'm Trump, and everybody is just supposed to stand by and watch him enact policies, and that, I'm sure he'll do things in some sense of favoring other people, because people who are actually practical are going to apply, policies and whatnot. And Trump, of course, will take credit for it. But it's not going to be anything that's going to lead us in a direction that is a shared prosperity across the nation. It's going to be very much skewed in favor of the very few people. It's going to create an insulated pocket of thriving, and it's going to deepen our inequalities in society, and it's not going to help to rise up the standard of living across the board in America. Whereas at least Kamala has the intention that she wants to create that type of economy. I don't think she really has the substance of how it's going to be approached most effectively, but she's receptive to the opportunity to be able to create that. She has the best interests of America at heart. Trump doesn't, and people are just tricked and lied to, and they believe his lies, and that's why they think that he'll be better at the economy. The other thing, of course, being that Kamala is not an economist, and it's not her strength, and she's leading on these points of practical policies that could be implemented if she gets enough support in Congress to be able to do that. But again, to me, I just don't think she's a visionary president. She doesn't vision these, potentials and creating the opportunities that actualize those potentials into actualities that, benefit us in outcomes. And it's not because she's inept, and it's not because she is a bad person or that she has some sort of nefarious intent. That's not her area of expertise. And I don't think she's thought enough about it in order to really have this broad view of how it could be best approached. Her policies, if able to be enacted, could be effective for the subgroup that she would be helping. And her intention is to help the middle class, which is a large group of people, but it's still a piecemeal solution. So while Trump would succeed at creating an economy where many Americans fail, Kamala would be able to create an economy where many people would be able to succeed, but it's not going to be able to raise the standard for everybody across the board like she says that she would like to do. So hopefully she could just continue to be receptive to the idea of best practices and look for those public-private partnerships that can help us to create that proper capitalism that we can engineer outcomes and opportunities that create the actualization of what we actually want to achieve to bring our nation forward. The next question was in regards to taxes. The question was, what income level should one expect their taxes to go up, and what will be the cap for the state and local deduction? So my belief is that we really need to intentionally set a timeline and adhere to a schedule to phase out traditional taxation, to bring about a new type of tax structure that will ensure that our tax dollars are going to the most effective use, so that we can create efficiencies in the government, which I know I always laugh. It's like almost like an oxymoron to say an efficient government. But it's possible if you have the right, intentions and the right proper gearing and the right types of setting up the appropriate steps that you need to take in the appropriate time, a formalization, and a calculation of what it's going to take to get us there. But we can phase out traditional taxation and eventually get to the point where we're no longer taxing labor wages. We are taxing everybody across the board for a stewardship tax, which is likened almost to the concept of a membership fee. And you pay into that membership and then you get lots of great benefits back out of it. And but some people have to pay a higher amount for that membership in the form of a penalization because you've gone out of the parameters of the intended use of our governance and our economies to make sure we're stewards. So if you are violating some sort of stewardship bound that we've created, then your taxation is going to be higher in order to negatively sanction you back into accord. And some companies, which is basically the way it already works, they'll pay for a fine, and that's just a part of their cost of doing business. In this sense, it would be kind of the same thing, but we can also create the enforcement on the other end of saying, if you don't start reining that in, we can just dissolve your company, and you can't own a company in America. You cannot operate that company in America anymore because that's not what we stand for. And our laws, our rules, our adherence is to say that we're stewards, and so we can't justify and allow you to get away with this. But to use taxation at a higher rate as a negative sanction to bring people back into alignment with stewardship, and then to create incentives for those who do align with stewardship, who do innovate, who create, who produce, and who consume in an alignment with stewardship. You create incentives in that structure for people to get kickbacks that help them to be able to gain capital advantages within the economy that they can build upon, and that could help them to create efficiencies in their businesses so that they can have more success in their businesses, or on the individual side, more opportunity for them to invest in a certain type of lifestyle that helps them to be better stewards. And these sorts of things in the economization of our taxation, and then drawing down the inefficiencies in our systems. Because if you have an economy that's about outcome engineering, and you say specifically we're going to be engineering for welfaring stewardship, and so when we achieve welfaring stewardship in this way, we no longer have to worry about people not having food, so we never have to worry again about having a food stamp system, and so no longer having to invest into that inefficient system, we can remove that cost from our budget, and now all that money that we have been saving can free us up to take risks for higher things, to invest in new things. Or in a better sense, if it's a baseline standard, everybody pays the same tax, but it fluctuates based off of whether we're incentivizing or we are negatively sanctioning somebody. That money can then go into investments to pay for pay it forward projects that move us in the direction of achieving another outcome. So, making sure everybody has food achieves the UN Sustainable Development Goal of zero hunger. We no longer have to have the food stamp program, so that program goes out. That money's no longer in there. We could either bring it into our coffers so we reduce our deficit, or we can reinvest that into another project that helps us to be able to achieve good health and well-being by improving the accessibility of all forms of holistic medicine, and for those to be available in localization of clinics, and to increase the amount of nurses and doctors and practitioners that are available to be able to help people, and then to make sure that the accessibility of that healthcare is so abundant that we have competitiveness that brings down the price of that, and then also to be able to have a part of your membership incentive, a healthcare system that is providing accessibility for people so that they don't have to pay these outrageous amounts of money to hospitals that are for profit, that end up price gouging people for medications and for care at a hospital. So incentivizing those types of programs, creating such efficient outcomes that reduce the inefficiencies in systems, help us close out useless and antiquated programs that are no longer needed because we've solved for that problem at the root cause level, instead of always having to pay for the symptomatic, manifestation of these sorts of things. We can do that on so many different fronts, so many different approaches. And when we start to do that, guess what? We no longer have to have that entire branch of not just having the dollars to pay for the food stamps, but also all of the administration costs gone, because we don't need that anymore, because it's been solved for in this, innovative way. And hopefully it's a private-public partnership, approach, solving for it in that way. And so not having that, we reduce the size of government. When you reduce the size of government, you reduce the cost of its overhead and operation costs. And when we do that, we're lowering the cost for operating the government, because we're lowering the amount of government that we need to have. And then if we're building for enforcements within our economy and enforcements within our structures of governance that empowers people to be self-governed and to be empowered to be self-sustaining, self-reliant, self-sustaining, self-sufficient, free and independent people that are self-governed, we don't need as much government, to control things, because we're self-controlled, self-contained. And then we'll be able to reduce the government in that way. And by creating those efficiencies and systems, reducing the price, spreading this abundance across the board for everybody to benefit from, and then raising the standard by which everybody gets to live, and then creating opportunities in projects that are, call out to people, hey, we need to get this particular project done in this area, who wants to come in and contract to get that done? You're creating those types of opportunities. And then you create, additional incentives in terms of getting specific things done, like increasing the housing. If you have a requirement for companies, in order to get contracts with the government, have to put in some pro bono type work in order to be able to be considered active in receiving government contracts. You have to do a certain amount of pro bono work. We can get companies to, government pays for the cost, but you're not making profit off of this because you're giving this service just to make sure that it gets done. You can increase the productivity that happens along those fronts, but then still providing this opportunity for these companies to apply for contracts to get other work done that they can profit from. And so when you're creating this type of system, you're creating incentive, you're creating negative sanction, you're creating positive sanction, and you're creating a proper intended use for the economy, and then bringing everybody into the involvement of achieving that and getting it done. And so when you have that type of system, you would be able to remove the regular tax-based system slowly over time, and eventually get to the point where that tax is consistent and stable across the board. And then you can create a scheduling of certain groups that have a tax rate that is locked in at a specific rate for a time period. And then they'll fall into a time period where they pay a lower tax rate, or they're able to get more tax cuts or more deductions for expenses, these sorts of things during that time period. So then it creates this pace by which people could innovate, where there's times when they are just developing and working as they do, producing as they do, and then times where they innovate and drive hard, research and development and creating new innovations and whatnot. And those types of shifts in their tax gives us a regularity and consistency in the economy that we don't really have right now. And it could be turned into an incentive that helps companies to, forecast, their future in a much more consistent way, because they know what that tax scheme is going to be from year to year, that only shifts based off of what schedule you're in, and then different companies have different schedules for different groups. This will create a natural competitiveness within the economy without stifling innovation or without hindering companies from being able to expand and to grow. Because you can continue to expand and grow, you're just going to have a better chance at being able to write off your expenses if you do it during this specific time frame. And by doing that and creating that competitiveness within the economy, you're giving opportunity for new innovations, new companies, new small businesses to pop up in the in-betweens and fill in those spaces. That is a true capitalism, and that is true opportunity, is creating the segmentations of opportunities to be able to pop up and flourish. You're creating those instances where somebody can come out of left field and bring some new innovation forth that just totally revolutionizes an entire market and commands it in such a way that the way we used to do things, we can never go back to that way anymore because it just doesn't make sense, and we've had those type of technological breakthroughs. But if we have this gearing towards producing in a very specific way, I think it would also help to get companies to be able to justify why they aren't growing during certain periods, is because, well, we can't grow all the time, because you can't. Anything that grows all the time, there's a limit to all growth. And so it also gives us this chance to no longer have an endless growth economy, that our economy is now about outcomes and producing outcomes. And so when we look at it in terms of that, our tax base is really about making sure that our outcomes are being achieved. And if they are, and we're aligned with our stewardship outcomes, we're within the planetary boundaries, and we're achieving within the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, we now have ways to be able to bring down the cost of our taxes, and then be able to create, abundances rather than deficits. Instead of operating off of deficit spending, we can operate in abundance. And then that abundance can be shared and used as a instrumental tool in our economy to be able to apply in certain ways, saying we need a project in this direction that solves for this outcome. Contract who wants to apply for the contract to get that done, and then we can drive innovation in that way. And so it gives us a capacity to truly navigate, chart our course, guide ourselves in a specific direction, and to be able to get us there. So tax has a great opportunity to be led in that direction, but for now, it really needs to be something along the lines of my biggest thing is Kamala's response to taxation is for all of these things that she wants to pay for in her opportunity economy. How are you going to pay for those sorts of things? Are you going to pay for it with just doing it and going into debt, or are you going to just try to pursue this tax change? And her solution was, yeah, we need to have an increase in corporate tax. And my vision of that is, I like the narrative that the Democrats try to use to say that everybody should pay their fair share of taxes. But what's fair, and who determines what's fair, and what's just, right, reasonable, and fair, in terms of that economy? Again, I really think that if we brought it into the realm of we're making sure that as your company prospers, that you're bringing the rest of the nation along with you. And as long as we're creating, ways and means for people to be able to invest in these things that need to get done, especially in terms of, maybe you don't necessarily pay taxes, but you do this pro bono work sort of thing, that is going to be a better outcome than just getting them to pay money, because what they're going to see is I have to reduce my bottom line. And, if you're going to have the increase in tax, then it's going to put me in a position where, maybe I don't want to do business here, sort of thing. So that's why I don't think that raising the tax on corporate tax to 28%, I think is what she's saying, is going to be the right solution, because it makes it seem like it's all being put on these people. It should be this baseline standard, and then anybody who's in gross violation or in excess of use, or out of alignment with stewardship, those are the people that are going to have to pay the higher price. So it is entirely up to you to decide whether or not you're going to pay that higher price. If you stay in alignment, it's going to be this baseline standard that everybody has to pay for. So I think that is a more reasonable approach, but I understand, because this has been what the Democrats have been trying to, push for a long time, is everybody should pay their fair share of taxes. I completely agree. We should not be having, multi-billionaires who, through many of their methods and their how of they got that money, was at the cost of human dignity, human life, the environment, degraded environment, violation of labor laws and EPA laws and many other laws, and skirting it because you have enough money to throw at, the legal system to get away with breaking the law, these sorts of things. So whether or not, that's another reason why I don't necessarily think money is a proof of success, because how you got that money really is the determining factor. Like, if you got that through, nefarious means or exploitations, then it's not deserved, and it is certainly not earned, and it is a gross, um, a gross expression of the terrible outcomes of unabated and unchecked capitalism in society. But yes, striving to become enriched and having money so that you can build and accumulate that wealth to apply in certain specific ways, we absolutely want to have that in society. But those sorts of people should not be able to get that off of not paying their people what they're due or they're owed, or off of, taking business approaches that are harmful. So, if you are bad at business in terms of violating certain standards that we have, certain regulations, then there should be a point where, you're no longer allowed to be a business owner. You're no longer allowed to run businesses. You can be a laborer. We're not saying you can't work and can't make money. Even speculative shares, I'm sure they would still be able to have that type of enrichment, but you cannot enterprise anymore because you don't know how to follow the rules, stay in your lane sort of thing. And because we have that type of gross inequality in society compared with people living on the streets and not having a safe place to call home, not having a place to, get ready for the day to be able to go to their job because they have to live in their car or they live in a tent on the side of the road.